Hi everyone, it's Phil Carrick again from the What It Takes podcast and philcarrick.com. I am absolutely delighted to have this guest on with me today. He's a hard man to get, I tell you, he's that busy, and he's busy doing podcasts as well. So this is a real coup for us today. I am delighted to welcome Tony from flowreel.com, the Hungry and Horny podcast, and Magic Flow Bus. Tony, welcome to the podcast today. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Phil. You are very persistent.
Yeah. So sometimes, Tony, ignorance is bliss. I just go for it. I need to get this guy.
Yeah. Well, we're finally here, so I'm happy to be with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And there's loads of reasons why I asked you on this podcast. You're a fascinating guy, and what you do as well, your business, just blew my mind. But before we get on to the revelation of flowreel.com, can I ask you, because this is not a Northern Irish accent. I think a lot of people have probably picked up on, Tony. So I know you're originally from San Francisco, and I love San Francisco. I wish I had my cup here actually, but I love San Francisco. I've only been there once. Beautiful, beautiful place. But can I ask you, what brought you from San Fran over to the wet and windy Northern Ireland?
Yeah, to Northern Ireland. So I was part of a group. If people know, he's a very popular man right now, Wim Hof, the Iceman. He was the fella from the Netherlands who set the Guinness Book of World Record for longest ever submerged in ice. And he pretty much developed a method called the Wim Hof method that teaches people how to do the breath work and be able to generate heat from within the body to sit in cold water or ice for extended periods of time. So in San Francisco, when I was a child, I grew up surfing in the Pacific Ocean, and it was very cold. At that time I was wearing a wetsuit, and I'd hear things about like hyperthermia and whatnot, and I didn't really know what that was. Fortunately, I never experienced it, but the thing I did remember after a session of riding waves in the ocean was a feeling of bliss, a feeling of peace. And because the waves were big and the currents were strong and you were in cold water, I felt like I had maybe had a release of tension, of energy. And I was just so relaxed. Some people joke that I may even sounded stoned. I still sound stoned, I'm just like generally a relaxed person. So the point is that food tasted better after surfing. I felt relaxed. Everything was like in high fidelity, and I didn't know what that experience was, but as I started to get older, it had this experience of timelessness, especially when I would like drop in a wave and I would get barreled or tubed, and it felt like I was in a vortex. But again, I didn't have any context for it. I didn't know what that was. And then as I got older and became an athlete in various sports, I had these moments of effortlessness and what I heard other athletes called the zone. And so I started to dive into books about it, and sports performance and mental states. And then on top of that, growing up in San Francisco is multicultural. So I had exposures to various religions within my family. So I went to Catholic school mainly for the education. I wasn't baptized, which was interesting because I was one of the few, obviously, that wasn't baptized while going to Catholic school. But I always had this feeling of peace when we would do church service and I would pray. And so combine all that religious experiences with different artifacts around the house because I grew up in a Filipino like Asian family, so there was like Buddhas around, and so just extremely curious. And then over the years, I started to understand like more and more what these states were. I started to practice meditation. And fast forward to your question, Phil, where I ended up in San Diego working with a professional athlete. So he had asked me to come along with him due to the technology that I work with, and then we'll get into that. But I heard about Wim Hof, the Iceman, and how he could control his physiological state, hence his psychological state, while being in something as strenuous as ice cold water. And so I was very fascinated because the more he talked, the more it reminded me of my experience surfing in cold water. And so I dove into his program. I learned his method, and next thing you know, because it was a Wim Hof group of people who were practitioners, but also like students of him around the world, I kind of became like known within the community, mainly because I had a stick where like I would wear these like white rim shades, and I would sit in like ice cold water and I look all cool. And then I had like all this hair, right? And to the point where like even Wim Hof noticed me. But a friend of mine from Northern Ireland, like we didn't meet yet, but one of his buddies said, hey, this fella just finished the Wim Hof training, and he's based in San Diego. And this fella, Scott Riley of Causeway Living, I think he was one of your internet marketing students. And so he reached out to me and he said, hey, I'm from Northern Ireland. I'm going to be in San Diego. I'd like to meet you. And I know that you had just finished the course. I'm about to finish it myself. And so we met in San Diego, in Carlsbad, Northern San Diego, North County. And we just totally clicked. In fact, we probably desecrated the famous Guinness beer because we were at a golf resort, La Costa, and they had a beer, and we had lunch together. At the end, they say like we had like different kinds of desserts, and we looked at the menu and they had a Guinness float, like a root beer float, but they made a float out of Guinness beer by putting coffee ice cream in it. And we both had that, and it was just like amazing. And then afterwards he said, come out to Ireland, come visit me anytime. And I took him up on that offer. And so I started to visit him. And then just through my own group that I put together at the time, I helped him develop, him and the group helped him develop, or excuse me, my group and I had helped him develop his business and the concept of Causeway Living. And eventually he created Dash and Splash, which was a 5K run walk. And then afterwards, everybody would jump into the cold Irish Sea, and then finally join each other in a cafe for a hot cup of tea or coffee and some treats and stuff, and just talk about their experience. And so we started hanging out, and then long story short, that's where I met my wife, Judith, and we met at Scott's event, and then the rest is history. I live here in Northern Ireland in Bangor, and eventually met you, of course.
That is incredible, Tony. That is some journey, isn't it? And it's so coincidental as well. The world's such a small place, isn't it? When you talk about Scott, yes, I've worked with Scott, and fabulous like yourself. And I really love hearing from people who are in the performance and the health and wellness industry, such as yourself and Scott. So I'm fascinated with some of the things that you do. And yes, I'm familiar with the Wim Hof method and his show that was on TV as well.
Yeah, it was on BBC recently.
It was. That's right. I didn't catch all of the series, so I'll have to do that. So, But you talk about the Pacific. That's and how cold it was. And you know, I suppose from somebody who hasn't swam in the Pacific, yes, I've been to San Francisco, but I haven't swam in the Pacific. When you said it was cold, I thought, yeah, right, okay. Is it really cold compared to the Irish Sea? But presumably you've dipped your toe into the Irish Sea.
Yeah.
And you talk about surfing as well. You know, I don't know if you've ever been off the coast of Donegal, you know, on Bundoran and those places where the surf schools are all around Donegal, and you see people jumping in wetsuits on the surfboard. Have you swam in our cold waters yet?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously here in Bangor, where Scott had the dash and splash, so that was my first experience with the Irish Sea. All year round, deep into the winters as well.
Ooh.
And then up north, over in Benone, yeah. So up there, it's definitely colder. And then the west coast, from Donegal down to Cork, which I found like, and it was summer, so the Atlantic in Cork was actually quite warm. There was like a warm current, very shallow. But to answer your question, the Irish Sea is colder than the Pacific. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And but still, it doesn't matter because of the techniques that we learned, and the I mean, I've been in colder with ice water,
Yeah.
especially ice water that's circulating. So it is like a magic trick, you know. It's kind of an optical illusion because, you know, people see ice cubes in a bathtub or some kind of like container, and you're in it, and yet the temperature is definitely colder than like a sea generally. But when you're in there, you create like almost like a pocket or a cocoon bubble around you. So if you don't move and you stay still, the water around you is actually warm.
Oh, okay.
But if I sat there and like started like rowing my arms and legs around and circulating that, and then I break up that like warm cocoon. So for like a photo op, if you just sit there still, yeah, it's cold, but it would be colder if I was just like thrashing around in there. So it is like a magic trick, but there is obviously something to the Wim Hof method, and thanks to Wim and science actually investigating this and doing proper research around the immune system and brown fat and the metabolism, and also breathing itself changed the game, you know, in terms of definitely rewriting physiology, what humans are capable of. And, you know, the monks of the East, especially in like the Himalayas and Mount Everest, all those people up there living in low altitude or high altitude, but low oxygen and very extreme cold weather, they have a different adaptation response, which is actually buried in our DNA as human beings. So it's just a matter of providing the proper stimulus and then understanding the dose, you know, that you could adapt over time, just like lifting weights in a gym. You're not going to go in a gym and lift, you know, your maximum right away. You'll definitely get hurt. The same with the cold water, the same with even saunas now. They're researching extreme heat and the effects, the health benefits that come, as they known from people that live in Scandinavia that practice sauna as well. So that's the best of both worlds, which we teach with my company. Even Scott Riley, his group also takes people through that. But that's the ideal situation where you would do, you know, hot and cold contrast, where you spend time in the heat and then you go in the cold and you go back and forth and talk about getting a high afterwards, you know. It's incredible.
I can imagine. Yeah, I'm sure that's some stimulant.
Yeah,
that's incredible. That so I think that would segue nicely into into chatting to you about really what you do, Tony, because I know what fascinated me, amongst other things, with you is the fact that you work with peak performance athletes, and you get them into a flow state. But one of the things, now all this fascinates me, but what really blew my mind was the electrotherapy that you carry out on people and animals,
Yes.
which just blew me away as well, and animals, that helps them recover from injury. Could you talk a little bit about that, and what exactly is electrotherapy?
Yeah, so most people are familiar with the TENS device. So if they go to physio or a chiropractic, anybody that uses an electrical device for either muscle stimulation, but generally for pain relief. And so that electrotherapy is at a higher amplitude, so a higher intensity, which is what causes the contractions in the muscles, the connective tissue, the fascia. So the thing with that is that it does provide a release of what they call endogenous chemicals called endorphins. So those are like our natural painkillers released by our own bodies within our body. So without taking a pain pill, which comes from the outside, exogenous, this is endogenous within the body. So the microcurrent device that I use, so that keyword micro means that the amplitude is very tiny. It's instead of like in the milliamp range, which is like 1,000 amp, it's in the millionth to billionth of an amp. It's very, very tiny. So the premise is that the cells in our bodies, whether it's the nerve cells, the heart cells, the muscle cells, they all work on a very tiny current level, which is every cell has a cell membrane on the outside. And that cell membrane has these little tiny gates called the voltage sensitive ionic channels. And those little channels are controlled electrically, but very tiny current. And so that's where my device comes in that I use called the Equiscope. And like you said, it doesn't matter. My mentor says it doesn't matter if it's a 2-legged cell or a 4-legged cell. A cell is a cell, and the cell membrane is controlled electrically in a very tiny amplitude, which is in the millionth to billionth of an amp. So how I got involved with this, similar to how I found out about Wim Hof, but just a series of synchronicities. My background out of college was basically exercise science. And so I was always dreaming of working with professional athletes, and animals just kind of came with the territory. But I was more of like a strength and conditioning coach, personal trainer. I did a little bit of body work as a massage therapist as well. So always fascinated with performance and healing, recovery with the body. And then I ended up on a tiny island in the South Pacific called Guam for love. And, it didn't work, the love part. But after working with a lot of the elite athletes on the island, and my experience in the strength and conditioning world, professional sporting world, Olympics, I was a little frustrated with the politics around it and the bureaucracy. And so out of like maybe desperation, because I did practice meditation, this goes into back to flow states, and some people are familiar with this thing called The Secret, where things would kind of manifest if you like keep your visualization and you keep your mind on what you want to achieve. So through my meditation practice, I kind of like prayed and I said, give me a new career where I felt like I would, it was more rewarding, it was satisfying, there wasn't egos involved. And I got this random email about a space age technology that helped people and animals heal 2 to 3 times faster than normal.
Oh, wow.
And my curiosity was piqued, but then my skeptical scientific mind was also like, this could be a sham. So I did my due diligence, investigated it. The story was around a stuntman named John Thorpe, and he worked with Hollywood, a lot of the famous TV shows of the 1980s, and he had shattered his leg like Humpty Dumpty, and was told he needed a total knee replacement in order to walk properly again. And funny enough, the Lee Majors, the Bionic Man from the $6 Million Man, the show, famous 80s show, he had gotten technology done, the same technology for arthritically crippled knees, because he was an avid tennis player. And he was friends with John, because John was his stunt man for that show. And he said, John, don't get the knee replacement because you'll be a liability in the stunt world. He said, before you even consider getting the surgery, just fly out to LA, because John was in Hawaii at the time, working on Hawaii 5-0.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so John flew out to Los Angeles, where they had this kind of top secret type of therapy. And long story short, he got treated. He was out of pain within a few sessions. Within I think a year and a half from the date of the injury, he was back to surfing, snow skiing, and hang gliding. And what was considered a medical impossibility, even the surgeon who had done just the surgery just to put the plates and screws in, he became a believer as well. So I did my due diligence. I was trying to prove John wrong, similar to Wim Hof, how I met Wim. They liked the fact that I was a skeptic and I was trying to prove him wrong. And so I ended up meeting John through a series of synchronicities on the island of Maui. And I saw his leg, and it looked like how are you walking on that? Because it literally was crooked, but he had full range of motion, even though he was bone on bone. He had no more cartilage left. And at that time was like 20 years after his injury. And even now he's 71. He's still doing all the things that he loves. And so I pretty much signed up for his first class. I had a sprained thumb from coaching football over in Guam. So I was standing on the sidelines, and a couple of the big linebackers or linemen were like practicing shoving each other on the line, and they came from behind me, and my kind of brushed against my elbow, but my thumb got caught in my shirt, so it sprained my thumb, and it wasn't really healing. And so during the training, I got my thumb treated, and like the pain was gone. So so that's pretty much the story. That's basically nearly 18 years ago when I did that first training. And then eventually I got on to working with horses and dogs and cats. And I mean, we can treat any living creature pretty much, from humans to like anything, even a chicken can be treated, So that was the beauty of working with this technology, and it's just gotten better over the years. And yeah, I've been fortunate to combine not only this type of therapy, which is under the umbrella Electro Therapy, called microcurrent, but also combine things like breath work, hot and cold, sort of kind of stretching, yoga, body awareness, animal flow, like moving the body, mobility, and then get into like nutrition, light therapies, and sleep. So that's pretty much what flowreal.com is about, is pretty much taking the best performance and healing methods around the world and consolidating it to what people can do step by step process. And then once they get good at it, then we give them, you know, another thing that they can add to their repertoire, their toolbox.
That is amazing. You know, honestly, I'm in awe here, Tony, and I really mean that because, you know, being an ex-athlete myself, like yourself, you know, you hear of people saying, "Oh, you played the wrong sports, and you're suffering for it now." And because I used to, you know, I used to play competitive squash, so there would be some days, Tony, I would be playing 2 competitive games of squash per day, and then I would go, and if that wasn't enough, maybe I would go off and run up the mountains a few times. So my knees were really getting pounded, and I know, you know, we've spoken about that before as well. But if there's people out there like myself who are suffering from pain, who have got knee pain, back pain, or they've got animals that are suffering from pain as well, you can what you're saying is you can potentially help them speed up the recovery process. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the technology, so most people, again, who are familiar with muscle stem or pain relief devices like TENS units or galvanic stem, ultrasound, as effective as they don't work down to the cellular level, and that's what's the key to healing. And so, yeah, like the higher the intensity, it's it's good in a way that it's providing endorphin relief, temporary pain relief, and blood flow. But it's only temporarily, you know, like in order to actually create a healing response, you have to get down to the cell membrane. And so the beauty of the equipment that we use is that it's reading your body at the same time as putting out this precise stimulation as an output. So it's both an input and output device, where all the devices on the market pretty much are just output only. Everybody's getting the same treatment, the same intensity, the same frequencies, regardless of what your body's responding to it, the stimuli. And so the inventor of this device, brilliant man that he is, apparently had put in a missile guidance chip in the machine because his background was in the defense system for America, for the military. And so he had developed the missile chip, the guidance system that's heat seeking, it seeks its target, hits it every time. Apparently, and this is, you know, I don't know for a fact if this is true or not, but we do know that the machine is able to read what's going on in the body, and then the technician can adjust the frequencies and intensities based on the feedback from the client, whether it's a human or an animal, or and also the feedback that the machine is receiving from the connection to the client. So but to answer your question, yeah, because of that input output and the ability to unlock the cell membrane to allow nutrients to get into the cell to feed it and help it recover, regenerate. And also when a cell is in pain or it's stagnant or resistant, the way I describe it is, if you look at our cell phones, you know, or a mobile phone, but I like to call it a cell phone because it is a cell, one cell talking to another cell, right? And so what we want is we want to charge both cells to 100%, right? And that's full battery, 100% capacity is fully charged with electrons. And then we want both cells to be 5-bar signal or 4 or 5-bar signal. So we want a pure signal between communication from one phone call or one phone or cell to another phone or cell. And so that you don't have any drop calls, you had the pure signal, no static, no noise, no drop calls, right? So we want every cell, the trillions of cells in our bodies, from our brain cells, our heart cells, and our muscle cells, bone cells, to communicate without any static, any noise. So the other analogy or metaphor would be a radio, right? Back when we had to tune the radio to find the perfect spot where it was just pure music and no static, right? So that's pretty much how the device works on a simplistic level. Of course, the human body is very complicated, but we found that if we charge the cell to its full capacity like a battery, and you remove the noise, the resistance, the impedance, so that it was pure electrical flow from all those tissues that I talked about, then the body is in the optimal state to heal itself. So that's the beauty of it, because the healing is actually happening by the body when it's given the proper resources, right? So the proper elements like water and like air. So air is a combination of different gases. Mainly we know about oxygen, but we also don't realize that we've been told that carbon dioxide is a toxin, you know, a waste product gas. That is not entirely true. You need CO2 in order to absorb oxygen. So all those nutrients are needed, plus electricity, plus all the biochemical compounds that we get from food and various elements, right? So when you put the body in its most optimal state, it will heal itself, including pain. Pain will just disappear. And so, you know, even if someone has the most degeneration in their body, no more cartilage, just, you know, basically a withering, atrophy of muscle tissue, you can bring it back, you know, even if the cartilage doesn't come back, but the person's out of pain, they're able to produce pain relief in their own body through endorphins. But it's not just temporarily, it like builds up, you know, and then you also have the ability to put the tension in the body in the right places. So the body will just start to like feel better. And then once it starts feeling better and you start moving more, you're going to build up your own energy. So, so that's kind of how it works, right? Because if you keep moving, then you're going to stay active and you're going to start to produce the energy that's needed in the body to become more active and pain-free.
I love it. I love it. And Tony, being a you know, being a sportsman myself. Okay, I don't do as much now, but I used to be. But about 5 years ago or so, I don't know, give or take, I just went on Google and I was searching for a professional who, you know, similar to a physio. Similar. So I went to that professional, and you're quite right. They used something similar to like a TENS machine. So it was, you know, it was almost like immediate gratification on my knees, and then some deep muscle tissue massage. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I feel pretty good. I would go, and then see the next day, I was exactly the same again. So it's really, it's really interesting to hear that you can actually build up the body as well. It's not just a, you know, it's both sort of inbound and outbound. Sorry, what was the phrase you used again?
It's similar, input output.
Input output. Sorry.
Yeah. So there's always feedback going on in our nervous system through our senses, and the brain and the nervous system, the corresponding nerves, including the eyeball, is actually part of the brain. People don't know that, right? So the eyeball is brain tissue.
Wow. Okay, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I found that out from my my friend. He's pretty famous now from Stanford, Dr. Huberman, and he's pretty much teaching people about how the brain neurophysiology works, you know. And so he said that, like, I was like, wow, because when a fetus is developing, the eyeballs is the brain.
Yeah.
And then at a certain stage of development, that's when the eyeballs actually pop off the brain, but it's still considered brain tissue. So when we look at each other in the eyes, we're actually looking at each other's brains.
Oh my word. You know, Tony, I am not going to look at somebody the same again.
Or even be like weirded out that I'm looking at your brain right now through your eyes. Yeah.
Because I would, you know, I would always connect with people through eyes. And, you know, when I talk to people, I always look at their eyes, and not in a freaky way. It's just, you know, I like them to think that I'm giving them the, you know, the attention they deserve.
Yeah.
But when I'm looking at their eyes now, oh wow, okay, I'm going to think differently. I'm going to think, I'm actually looking at your brain. That's amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, they do say that like the seat of the soul is in the eyes, right? You know, and the eyes don't lie, and it's pretty true. Like, but if you don't want to go into the whole like esoteric soul kind of thing, but just on a physiological level, that the eyes are the brain, you know, and that there is feedback, and people know when you're paying attention to them and you're looking them in the eyes, and some people are uncomfortable with eye contact, and then that's also like healable as well, right? Like I was very shy, introverted, didn't like eye contact, and that was one of the things that I had through proper dosage or exposure therapy. It's just getting used to making eye contact and prolonged eye contact over time. And that's the thing with any of these modalities, is when give yourself enough time to learn, because that's what learning is. Like, learning is just exposure to a new stimuli and then adapting to it. But if you get too much exposure where you can't adapt or recover from, then that's when you go backwards, right? And so that is like with dosage, is either a medicine or a poison. And so once you understand that, and you understand, you know, as you're alluding to earlier, input, output, ingoing, outgoing, once you understand like how learning works, you can apply it across anything from electro therapy to learning music or languages to prolonged eye contact. So one of the things that freaks a lot of people out, it's like, not only are they afraid to have eye contact with other people, but they're afraid to look in the mirror at themselves, their own eye contact, right?
Of course.
And I had practiced that as a young person, learning to just look at myself in the eyes, and something happened. The same with prayer, meditation, mindfulness. When you sit quietly with yourself, that's the other thing that freaks people out. They can't sit in silence in a room by themselves with no more input coming in from the external environment, right? Flotation tank, sitting in a dark cube or a tank and salt water on your back with no light input. You're just in warm water, your skin temperature, and that's like meditation on steroids, right? But that also freaks people out. It freaked me out the first time I did it, right? So my point is that once you know what your threshold is, then you can modulate just enough over that, you know. Like the same with talking to people. Just say hi when you're walking down the street. That's all you have to do. Just say hi. That's it. You don't have to have a conversation with them. You don't have to look at them in the eyes the whole time. Just say hi and smile and practice that. And then that just gets easy, you know? And then you add, like, you ask a question or something next, right?
Absolutely. And I'm so pleased you mentioned smile whenever you said, you know, just say hi to people, because that really is, you know, it's projecting gratitude. It's projecting your attitude to them as well. Because I was speaking to somebody and they said along the lines of, well, what can I give people? I haven't got anything to give. Says, you've got that, you've got a smile, you've got your eyes, you've got, you can give that to people when you're walking down the street.
Yeah.
I mean,
and what is that like? If you were to look at that on a you know, scientific level, physical level, people don't realize, like, when you say energy, you think it's like, oh, it's woo woo, right? But we're talking about like physical, like the physical world, and electricity is being generated by some part of your nervous system. You know, let's say Phil, right? Like where is Phil coming from? Like they still haven't figured that out, right? Like in terms of the brain and the nervous system. But the fact that electricity is coming through all your tissues, including your voice, is being activated by a signal from the brain, creating vibration, saying hi. That vibration is going out and hitting people in the ears, going into their brain and creating a response. So that's just simple physical energy and vibration. And on that level, it's not woo woo at all, right? You can take out the esoteric part, but just that fact alone. And like the heart is controlled electrically, right? A lot of people are like, oh, you know, the work that you do with that microcurrent device is so tiny, it doesn't have an effect. You got to see the muscle contraction, you got to, and it's like more is not necessarily better, right? And so what happens when someone goes into cardiac arrest and they flatline, right? One, they're in the hospital and they are hooked up to an electrocardiograph or an ECG, EKG machine. You're actually seeing their heartbeat on a like computer screen or a TV screen, right? So that's electrical. So the signal coming off the heart is electrical, right? And then how do they bring someone back who have flatlined?
Through the current.
Right? Yeah, so they jumpstart them with a defibrillator. And like the ones that we see now that are like on the walls at different like facilities, I just found this out recently. It actually doesn't jumpstart the heart, it actually stops the heart. It resets the heart so the heart can come back to life. So instead of shooting a lot of voltage of electricity through the chest like they do in the hospital, where they say clear, right? This one, you just put the pads on it and actually forces the heart to stop and then resets it so that the rhythms are regular and not irregular. So all this stuff, my point is that we realize that the heart is electrical. Well, the brain is electrical and the connected tissue. So the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, the bone, the cartilage, the fascia, and the skin is all electrical. And where I'm getting at is when people are anxious, when people are in pain, when they're depressed, their physiology, their brain, their heart, and their muscles, if we were to look at that connection through a heart graph, we would see how fast their heart's beating per minute, their respiratory, how fast are they breathing per minute, so how many breaths are they taking per minute? Now, if we would have the EEG, what they put on monks to study their brains, all those little, so they're reading their electrical signals. If we could read their brain waves as well. And they also have EMG, so they put the pads on the muscles. You can see what the wavelengths and the waveforms are going on. So if you have that on the brain, the heart, and the muscles of people that are in pain or animals, you would see that there's a lot of static. The frequencies are fast, or sometimes they're like too slow, right? But the point is that their brain, their heart, and their muscles are out of sync. And so that's what the difference between people that are having a peak performance, a peak experience, that are in flow state, their brain waves, their heart waves, their breathing rate, and their muscle tension is all harmonized. And so, and they're not in pain. Their body's producing all the amazing like dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, adrenaline, you name it, all in the perfect amount that if people were to take the street version of all this, they would all have an overdose. But the body produces it in the right amount, and they're not in pain. Even if they have no cartilage, their discs have shrunken, you'll see that pain is actually only produced in the brain. And so that's what happens. Like, even if you can't regenerate some of those tissues, but we can control the harmonization between the brain, the heart, and the muscles, all your connective tissue, your disc, your cartilage. If you can control that, even if there's degeneration due to like wear and tear, supposedly old age, and even dehydration and lack of minerals, you can produce no pain. You can go back to doing what you love. So that's completely possible.
That is amazing.
Without
Tony,
pain pills, without surgery.
oh my word, absolutely. And that is utopia, isn't it, for many, many people? Because, yeah, I mean, let's not go down the pills and
They had their use, right?
They do, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
But like there's got to be a way to graduate out of them. So we always tell people, like, if you're in pain, like, take what you need to get relief, because of the mental anguish, the actual mental suffering that comes from pain and not being able to like move and get out of bed or whatnot. But you have to have a exit strategy. The same with surgical intervention, whether it's an acute accident or injury, or a tissue has torn. I say, in most cases, go get the surgery to reattach it, and then have an exit strategy from there, you know? So,
Brilliant.
yeah, but sometimes surgery isn't needed, that the body can adapt and find new ways. So we have a client that who tore her ACL, and she basically just decided against getting surgery, and that ACL reattached to the other ligament, I think the MCL, you know, or the PCL in her knee. And she went back to competing at a high level, and they just won the European Championship in Aussie rules football.
No way. That's incredible. And that's without any medical intervention.
Without any surgical intervention, yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Tony, I'm sad at the minute because unfortunately all good things have to come to an end at some stage.
Yes.
And I could speak to you, my goodness, not for hours, but for weeks. But so
months, years, the rest of our lives. Yes,
absolutely. So Tony, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, best way is flowreal.com. So FLOWREAL.com. We also have a business social media account called Magic Flow Bus on Instagram. So at Magic Flow Bus, and they can reach us there as well. I'm not a big social media guy, as you know, Phil, but for our business, that's our business handle on Instagram.
Brilliant, thank you. And one other thing as well, the Hungry and Horny podcast. So if anybody wanted to listen to that, how do they find that on YouTube, Tony?
Yeah, just type in Hangry, so HANGRY, and Horny, so HORNY, podcast, and it should pop up. We're also on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever like podcasts are hosted. So
fabulous. Well, Tony from flowreal.com, I just want to thank you so much for your time today, my friend.
Thank you so much, Phil. Appreciate it, man. I can't believe how fast time just blew by.
Yeah, absolutely. It was brilliant, wasn't it? I absolutely loved it. So Tony, thank you. Thanks once again, my friend, and you take care of yourself. Take care. Bye.
Take care.